Let's talk about what you think are some of the more authentic or believable pictures.
Yes, I'll have to defer a little bit here to the experts. I'll have to turn to men like Bruce Maccabee
Mm-hmm.
and others
Mm-hmm.
who have examined some of the cases. I'll mention one in particular. The first one that comes to mind, to my mind, and I think to maybe the minds of many others, is the McMinnville, Oregon case. Paul Trent and his wife. This was in 1950, as I recall, in March, a long time ago, at a time when the special work that Tim does would not be available to any technology that we can imagine. The photography, the two pictures were taken. They were taken, I believe, in the morning, was it, or was it late afternoon? I don't recall. The shading and shadows involved were part of the contention that some were wrestling with. But anyway, what happened, she went out to feed the chickens or do something, and she saw something strange in the sky. She got Paul's attention. He came out and then went back in, got his camera, came out and took two pictures of a discoid object, which by Bruce's measurements and calculation tends to have been somewhere around 30 to 35 feet in diameter, roughly a mile away, had a flat bottom, sort of a beveled and dome-shaped top with a little spire slightly askew up top, center. And the other picture shows more of it in a lifted edge view so that the bottom appears to be dark, but the tip of that little spire is still visible. These two pictures have been subjected to all kinds of scrutiny, and the consensus of the opinions of many people, not just Bruce, seems to be that they are in fact valid photography of a completely unknown object. There seems to have been no motivation whatsoever on the part of the Trents to make any money of this thing. Matter of fact, when somebody or Dr. Hynek went out to find the photography or talk to them about this, they found it under the couch in the living room. You know? That's not where you put it if you intend to put it on a magazine someplace. Here's one of a series of pictures of a strange object which approached the island of Trindade off the coast of Brazil on January 16, 1958. It's regarded as authentic by most who have examined the circumstances and was taken from a Brazilian Navy survey ship. It was seen by nearly all of the crew on deck at the time. This shot of the same object shows a side view resembling a slightly squashed planet Jupiter with a dense ring around its midsection. Here's an enlargement of the object in one of the most interesting photos of a distant object seen in the night sky. It was taken by 14-year-old Alan R. Smith before dawn in Tulsa, Oklahoma on the 2nd of August, 1965. It's unidentified after very careful case investigation and photo analysis. I recently spoke to Mr. Smith, now a grown man, still living in Oklahoma, and still convinced that it represents a true unidentified flying object. This is the first of two photos taken by Warren Smith on July 3rd, 1947, about 60 miles from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. It's interesting that it was taken the day before the reported crash of an unidentified object near Roswell, New Mexico, a case now under intense investigation and still unexplained. Here's an enlargement of the object in that previous photo. Analysis has revealed that it was approximately a mile away and about 35 feet in diameter. It looks like an aluminum hamburger with the meat hanging out. The object had descended beyond some trees, then suddenly rose again, and Smith took this photo in a hurry. The object image is slightly blurred. Dr. Hynek examined the photography of the clouds in both of these pictures, and they indicated that there had been very little time lapse between them. Also, Warren Smith was interrogated by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police regarding this incident, and he swore it was true. The penalty for lying under those circumstances would have been a $10,000 fine and imprisonment. And he defied that and claims that these were true photographs of a real unidentified object. UFOs have been reported to be cigar-shaped, and here's one. Here's a photo of a similarly shaped object by Joe Ferrer. He reports that it had a crane-typed rod which moved in, and another of the photos he took of it shows a dome-shaped object in the distance that he said emerged from this long, dark object. No technical analysis is available of this set of photographs taken near Woonsocket, Rhode Island. Nocturnal lights are perhaps the most frequently reported unidentifieds. Here we see a common light configuration, 2 white and 1 red light, in a sort of lopsided triangle hovering in the sky. This is most frequently reported. This one remains unknown. More frequently, the color of nocturnal lights is reported as orange. Here's a group of 3 unknown orange lights with visible diameters, and unknown. These nocturnal lights were photographed and were seen by many witnesses between Southbury and Waterbury, Connecticut on May 26, 1988 at about 9:30 in the evening. Careful study of the circumstances and testimony of credible witnesses rule out the official explanation, which will be shown on the next slide. Note the repeating sequence of colored lights around what seems to be the rim of a circular object. The witnesses reported seeing only the lights, no structure. There's a small light near the inner part of the ring, which may represent a star in the distance. And if you'll notice the blue-white, the strong blue-white lights, there are the same sequence of lights going from left to right as you count around. That would be very difficult to do in this explanation as to what the FAA said was going on. Here's an artist's rendition of the FAA's official explanation. A group of ultralight aircraft flying at night in a circle at lower than safe flying regulations. There were ultralight aircraft flying, but they could not possibly appear as they did in the previous unidentified object photo. Somebody is trying to fool somebody else. Here's another true nocturnal light, still unexplained, taken by Stanley Fouch on November the 10th, 1975, when he and some friends were, just about 2 miles south of Kansas City at about 10:45 in the evening. Several time exposures of about 20 seconds each were taken. Here's one of them. At first, the object looked like a distant illuminated cucumber in the sky. Stationary at first, it then took off, and the picture here is a time exposure as it traveled across the sky, varying in intensity and color. The object, if it was an object, disappeared in the distance by virtue of its rapid motion. An interesting sidelight to this case is that months later, a professional scientist, in going over his magnetometer strip charts, noted severe disturbances on the chart, so large that he made a notation on the side that undoubtedly his instrument was acting up. The time of the disturbance? Yes, 10:45 p.m., November the 10th, 1975. I included this shot at the cover of a publication by the Belgian UFO research organization SOBEPS, showing what they term an exceptional case. It was observed, and this photograph taken at the time of a very important case involving Belgian F-16 fighter jets tracking the object on radar during a repeated chase of amazing maneuvers. This was taken October 27, 1979, near a tidal river mouth at Motunau, an island north of Christchurch on the east coast of the South Island of New Zealand. The photographer did not observe the cluster of lights when taking the photo at dawn about 6:15 a.m. He was trying to photograph a boat on the river, but we can't see that boat or the river in the cropped shot of the interesting and still unidentified group of lights that we see here. No structure was seen, just the lights. It is not a lens flare. A commercial airliner approaching Tehran airport observed and photographed these 3 objects in the night sky ahead of them. The photography is poor, but they called the terminal, and controllers told them that they were observing on their radar objects about 10 times the size of a jumbo jet in late spring of 1978 in Iran. About that same time in the spring of 1978 in Iran, a young student, up late studying for exams, had seen objects for several days and had his camera ready. Out his window, he says, he saw this object and photographed it at night. The report reached the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States government, and a copy was released during a Freedom of Information Act case by researchers. The shape resembles that of the three objects in that previous photograph from the aircraft approaching the Tehran airport. Finally, on October the 8th, 1978, in Iran, near the Lake Urmia, a young man by the name of Franklin Ury and his younger brother took this picture from his home while playing soccer in their backyard. His parents were at a school meeting for teachers and came home to find the boys hiding in their bedroom. What you're looking at is that small bump of light at the edge of the roof. Let's blow that up and see a little bit more of the image of the interesting object. This one shows the edge of the house. The enlargement shows just as it was taken by the young student in Shiraz earlier that year. The shape is very similar. The parents swear that the boys could not have gone to the roof and taken a picture of a hat, which this surely resembles. And this enlargement begins to reveal three red spots in the upper section. But the closer we become to the enlarging of the object, the more detail we lose, and the same thing happens here as in the enlargement of the McMinnville photograph I mentioned earlier. But in this darker print, the red spots show up much more clearly. The witness and his family came to the United States, settled near Chicago, where they brought this photograph to the attention of Dr. Hynek. The young Franklin Ury is now a graduate of aeronautical engineering from the California University and swears that this is no hoax. On October the 8th, 1981, at about 11 a.m. local time on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, a single frame of 35mm color film was exposed to a beautiful mountain scene. When it was developed, a sharply focused disc-like object was seen, which had not been seen by the photographer, perhaps because of the single-lens reflex camera momentarily blocked her vision at the moment of exposure. Careful analysis has discounted the Frisbee explanation. Then Dr. Richard Haines, having located no manufacturer making one with a clear circular dome in the top center, mainly because the Frisbee would be difficult to throw very far with that design. And here's an enlargement of the object in that Vancouver Island photo. If you look carefully, you can see the clear dome-shaped center, the sun reflecting from behind the photographer. This hat-shaped white object was photographed near Belotic, Yugoslavia, during 1973, and it remains unexplained. A similarly shaped object was photographed on the west coast of the USA by a man by the name of Rex Heflin. The similarity is strange and interesting. Here's an enlargement of the Belotic object. A young man by the name of James Allen, then of Pitlochry in northern Scotland, reports that he was returning from a photographing trip when he heard a weird whirring sound and looked up and saw this strange discoid object and took a picture of it. Researchers in Scotland felt that it must be a hoax, but Allen insists that it isn't and has never made any attempt to profit from it. It's still not proven either way, hoax or true UFO. The sun is to our right, and the trees on your left in the other photograph were the edge of trees nearby. Here's one of several photos of a dark, circular object, slightly blurred, taken by David Knudsen of Surrey in British Columbia, Canada, with an Instamatic X-15. If any of you know anything about astronomy and weather conditions, I'm sure you'll recognize this as a weather balloon at low elevation before it has begun to expand in the higher altitudes into which the sphere will move as it reads information about the Earth's atmosphere. A farmer by the name of Richard Mull found this strange star-shaped set of grooves in his soybean field, west of Wauseon in northwest Ohio on March 11th, 1983. He could see it from the road. It wasn't too far away. He went to the spot and investigated it, and he found in the center of the depression a small hole about 2 inches in diameter, going straight down to a depth of almost 6 feet. He said there was no evidence of soil compaction to cause this. Utility people and a science professor from the University of Toledo examined the markings, but they could find no explanation for it. The professor was expecting it to have been a meteor strike, but there was no such evidence. The utility people were expecting it to be a blast from an underground service line, but it's not there. We don't know what caused that mark. 3 members of a farming family claimed to have witnessed an unusual luminescent object hovering over their land. After departing, the soil over which the object allegedly hovered was found to have undergone physical and chemical changes, lasting for several months. This is the most thoroughly examined yet unexplained physical trace case on record. 2 young girls were preparing for bed and saw out their bedroom a large red object rise from the soybean field near their home farm and moving swiftly over the house into the night sky. In the morning, they told their father of one of the girls at the breakfast table, and he told them to stop telling such wild tales. You can imagine his surprise when he examined his bean field and found the vegetation wilting where the girls said they had seen the object. This photo was taken sometime later, showing where the beans had been killed by whatever they apparently saw. These 4 photographs were sent to us by a research group in Denmark and represent the work of a commercial artist trying to get some photography for an advertisement, apparently, by the company named on the side of the building. The interesting thing about these is that these were all standard photographs. This one, however, shows this strange anomaly up here, which we don't really know what it represents. If you put a magnifying lens on that, however, and look at it very carefully, you'll see that it looks a little bit like a shaving brush in shape. But there are some interesting rings that go out around this as it goes out, as if it were, in fact, some type of an object moving through the sky in this direction and with a reaction at the back end of it as its means of motion. It's a completely unexplained image, not a lens flare. This is one of the photographs taken by Dr. Hynek from the commercial airliner in the early 1970s, we believe, from a window out of which he was able to see about a mile away or less an interesting configuration at about the same elevation, 33,000 feet in the air. He didn't know what it was. We don't know what it was. But I put my magnifying lens on this, and I see what appears to be a break between this part of the structure and this part of the structure right there, and a little bit of a difference here. And this strangely resembles, if we were to cover this part of it, the shape very often reported by people seeing a discoid object. What it was, we don't know. An unidentified object.
Let me take you to Costa Rica in September of 1971, and I'll go very briefly here. There's a large article that has been written by myself and Dr. Villet on this case, but a government airplane was flying at 10,000 feet altitude. Its job was to take photographs of the ground every 20 seconds using a very accurate camera. On one of the frames taken, next slide please, as the airplane is flying in a straight line, Here's Lake Arenal, here. It's flying on a straight line. Next slide, please. Near Lake Arenal is the Lago de Cote, which is a small lake here. Here's Arenal here, down in the corner. This is to the northeast. This was the location of the ovni that was photographed from above by the government airplane. Next, I show you an enlargement of the ovni. Next slide. This is a very large, symmetrical, oval object, approximately 200 feet across, we think. But and we received the original negative from the Costa Rican government, which was 9 by 9 inches in size. Very large, professional. And what the negative shows us, well, many things, but one thing is, this is not fake. This is not a blemish or an artifact on the negative. This is a real aerial object, at least 10,000 feet at the surface of the lake or closer. But the front edge of it, this edge right here, is perfectly smooth. The top edge is not smooth at all. There is a fractal-like pattern back here, but not here. Next slide, please. Here's a little larger picture of this. It looks to be a cone with a point here, with seen from the top, perhaps. There seems to be a third dimension to it. We don't know what size, perhaps 20 feet here, thick, and we don't know what the other side looks like. We're going to go through a number of slides, and I'm going to try to convince you that there is a wealth of good quality photographic evidence. Czechoslovakia. This photograph was taken by the director of the Andreev Observatory, who sent it to Dr. J. Allen Hynek, from whom I received this print. And there's no explanation for it. We don't have the exact date, unfortunately. It's about 1970s, I believe, early 70s. But it's a very interesting event, which you're going to see a very similar case in just a moment from the U.S. Navy. Next slide. Yungay, Peru. These photographs are coming from around the world. In this case, we have 2 discs. I will point out, generally they fly with the longitudinal axis horizontally. It's very unusual to get a photograph of one object, much less 2. In this case, there were 4 separate exposures taken. Next slide. This should be an enlargement of that previous. Sun angles are consistent. Shadows, reflections are consistent. Next slide. In general, we find oblate spheroids with an axis of symmetry. If you take a line and bisect the image in one direction, you can do a mirror image, and you'll find a left for right symmetry, for instance. Now, this next case is very interesting. It involves the SST Concorde on one of its very early flights, before it was put into commercial operation. And here it is flying over France. It was on a flight, next slide please, to investigate the solar corona, basically the magnetic field of the sun. And to do that, you need to be in a total eclipse situation. So they picked a day where the moon was right in front of the sun, and they positioned the airplane with a lot of equipment, scientists, and so forth, at that point, and they started snapping their pictures. Well, you can actually see, with a little imagination, the field lines coming down and above here in this orientation. The sun is behind the moon right here. You see the stars of the dark sky background. Next slide, please. Well, there was a scientist on board by the name of Jean Begot. He was a French astrophysicist, and he was taking pictures of this whole affair. And this is one of his photographs he took through a special optical port. You see the Earth down below, it's dark. You see the sky glow at the horizon, the terminator there. And you see the dark sky above. You're over the Sahara Desert flying east at a very high rate of speed, almost keeping up with the shadow. It extended the length of their observation. Well, Dr. Bagot took the picture and continued to look out the window, and he noticed this little spot of light in the sky. And so, thank you. Yes, right here. So he pointed this out to his colleagues, and they took, I believe, only one picture of it. Next slide, please. This is an enlargement of that little spot. And again, I'd like to point out the symmetrical nature. If you bisect the image this way, it's almost a left for right image. What you're going to see today are primarily reflecting phenomena. This happens to be an emitting phenomena. It seems to be giving off its own luminous energy, although we don't know what's underneath the plasma, perhaps. Well, anyway, the group of scientists on board the plane were a little worried because they knew the press was going to hear about it. They were going to be asked what it is. And so they got together and talked about what they should say, because they didn't know what it was. And so I'm paraphrasing a bit, but what they came to say was, this is possibly one of the Perseid meteor shower impacts. It was something coming in through the atmosphere and burning up, all right? Even though it was hovering there for quite some time. They failed to mention that. And then another scientist said to the press, this is published in a French newspaper, this is a phenomenon which has never happened before, which will never happen again, and is of no scientific interest. Well, I beg to differ with them. Au contraire. Next slide, please. We still don't know what it is. Tijuana, Brazil. That's where this photograph came from. And as you can see, it's been blown up so far. We're beginning to see grain structure in the film. I'm not going to go into the detail of the photographic analysis here. It's just that would take maybe a year of graduate classes to do that adequately. Again, look at the symmetry. I try to point that out in most of these pictures. Next slide. This is a map of Vancouver Island, British Columbia. I grew up right down in here. I heard about a case that took place in Campbell River, right here. A couple had been on holiday with their 16-month-old daughter, and they were driving up to her sister's house at the north end, right up in here. And on the way, they stopped at a provincial park to stretch their legs, let the dog run, so forth. Next slide. So they're about halfway up, and she has a Mamiya 35mm camera and takes a picture of her husband and little daughter beside a lake. Then she stands up, she said to me, turned around and saw this mountain. And this cloud on the top reminded her of a volcano. So she said to herself, I'm going to take a picture. It's kind of my personal volcano. And I'm going to prove to my husband I can do a good job of photography. He'd been kidding her she couldn't take a good picture. Well, as you can tell, she took a very good picture. And in fact, she captured something in the sky that nobody that day saw. It took 2 weeks for the prints to come back, and there it was on the print. It was circulated around the neighborhood for maybe a week. It went into a drawer, or actually a shoebox in the closet, and forgotten. And I saw the picture about 2 years later, got interested in it, and did some study on it. My hypothesis is it was a Frisbee, and the husband was playing a hoax, and he taped a little dome on the top and threw it up, and she took a bunch of pictures and submitted it, okay? Well, first of all, they may have made no money on this photograph. They waited 2 years. I have the original negs, and it's the only frame on the whole roll with this picture on it, so they did a pretty good job by chance, and so forth. Next slide, please. She said her narrative is that she's focusing on the tip of the mountain, and sure enough, that's where the mountain is, near the center of the frame. If I were going to do a hoax like this, I'd focus probably or aim it at the object itself, although that's inconclusive. That's maybe a very carefully contrived hoax. And so any photograph that you have for analysis is only as good as the photographer and their motives and training. the camera, the lens, the film, the processing, the story that surrounds it, on and on and on. No photograph can stand by itself. And as we enter the digital age of photography, it's going to be almost impossible to verify the legitimacy of a UFO photograph. Analog photography is hard enough when you're down in the film grain, but digital photography is almost impossible. I once said it is impossible, and somebody caught me on that, so I'm wavering a bit. Next slide. Well, here's a blow-up of it. It is opaque to the sun, I believe. I used microdensitometry and computer enhancement and lots of other techniques looking for a suspension thread, thinking it was a balloon supporting a model. I went out and bought a bunch of Frisbees. I'm pretty good at Frisbee now after this. I wrote to the American Frisbee Association, and I can tell you the world records and all this. Well, my wife loaned me one of these legs, little egg-shaped plastic containers that pantyhose come in. Spray painted it orange, glued it on the top of the Frisbee, and I tried to throw that Frisbee. And would you believe Frisbees don't fly if there's a little dome on the top like this? It loses the lift. The lift goes away. I couldn't make it go from here to the middle of the table. So if he could do that, he's a better man than I. I don't think that Frisbees will fly with that disc on there. Well, then I took photographs of my Frisbee. Again, that's the hypothesis. Into the lab, digitized the images, looked at reflection factors and all this stuff, and there's a lot of reasons it's not a Frisbee. Next slide, please. It really is. I don't believe it's a Frisbee. I don't want to belabor the point here. Sun angles are all adequate. The presence of the cloud in the field of view gives a wonderful calibration on brightness. And I will tell you this, that the reflection off the polished portion of the object exceeds the brightness of the cloud by about 1.5 log units, base 10. Next slide. Next slide, please. Here's another enlargement, kind of halfway frame size. So this brightness right here is consistent with polished, let's say, chrome reflecting sunshine. That doesn't mean it is chrome. It means it's just has the same reflection factor, much higher than cloud, which is well known. Next slide. Well, we come to Belgium. These slides were provided to me by an organization over there that has been looking at this case. You heard about this case yesterday, actually. Triangular shaped with reddish yellow lights at each corner, and then a more orangish red light centered in the bottom. Well, this is pretty close to the original exposure of the one frame that was taken by this gentleman with a 35 millimeter camera color film. Some very interesting things going on here. Next slide. Here's a computer enhancement done by the University of Belgium. I'm sorry, the Military Academy did this one. Where they can kind of subtract a luminance effect to get down to the real hot spots, the real bright hot spots. And if this is a rigid object, and if these are lights attached rigidly to the corners, how do we explain a V, a little U-shaped V, a bent straight line and a straight line? There's no geometry we can find of a rigid object in yaw, pitch, and roll that would explain those lights. Next slide, please. Let's take a look at some of the corner lights now, one at a time. Next slide. All right, I believe this is the lower left. In an image like this, the color doesn't mean anything, for those of you who are not familiar with the pseudo-color. But the computer can assign a color to what was once a gray, a level of gray. And since the human eye is so much more sensitive to color, it's helpful in pulling out minor details, fine details, such as this structure here in the sky background. Let's take another slide, please. That was linear. This is clearly a J with some very interesting boundary profile around it, which is hard to understand. Next slide. And we have a little more circular area. Well, this case has not been explained. It remains an unidentified aerial phenomenon. That does not mean that it's from outer space necessarily. It means it hasn't been identified. And the Belgian government has gone on record. First of all, they were honest enough to open up the data right away, no cover-up, as far as we can tell. The military cooperated extensively, and the UFO research group, which is multidisciplinary, did a great job, not only using their own talents, but calling upon experts around the world. And that's the way this business ought to run. No classification, nothing to hide. The phenomenon is worldwide. Let's get on with it on a worldwide basis. Next slide, please. Well, the computer can also subtract and add, well, I should say subtract is a better word, background brightness, so that we can now see the outline of the object itself that was not visible in the original to the human eye. The information was there in the film, but you just couldn't see it. The computer helps you see it. And I just want to point out, it is symmetrical, and here's the axis here, so that if you flop this edge over, it matches up here. The tips here, if you want to call it a wing section, which I don't think it is, I don't think it's a lift, in other words. It's flat, this is the rear end. My conjecture is that as the central source is the source of anti-gravity, basically the support capability, and that what's going on at the corners is the attitude stabilization system, the ability to yaw, pitch, and roll in the angular dimension. Next slide, please. Sassfi, Switzerland, a professional photographer, was out hiking one day with some friends and took this picture. He, first of all, heard a noise, I understand, up ahead of him on this trail, and he had a camera along. I guess over there photographers take their cameras on the holiday. And sure enough, something starts rising up and shows up here in the picture. Next slide, please. This is a lake in Argentina at fairly high altitude. And I point this out merely, it's an example of a luminous phenomena rather than a reflecting phenomena. And once again, it has an axis of symmetry, which is vertical. Computer enhancements show that the main body of the object right here seems to have something protruding or a tail-like structure, like a gaseous substance or plasma or something coming out of it, coming down. It was seen by many people. Photographed by an American, I believe. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is upstate New York, famous Hudson Valley series of sightings some of you may be familiar with. Well, I don't know if thousands, but many hundreds of eyewitnesses over quite a period of time videotaped this, got stills, as you can see, and a lot of eyewitness capability. The skeptics came along and told us this was a formation of light planes flying in too close together at night. That's a marvelous flight, if they can do that. And the FAA should take their licenses away. I'm told that as the object flew along, it rotated slowly. And if airplanes can do that, that's remarkable. Multicolored points. As it flew over, it was rather large in size. People underneath it could not see the stars inside the circle, suggesting it was a solid body, and that these lights were along perhaps the perimeter.
Among the first photographs taken on the old tin-type cameras was one at Drobak, Norway, showing a photographer with the big bellows over his head and a big camera on a tripod was taking a scene of the harbor, an afternoon scene of the harbor, early evening, and he saw an object moving from right to left across the field of view, snapped a picture of it, and got perhaps the first photograph of a UFO at close range in Earth's atmosphere in the sky here. And that picture was taken on the 27th of July in 1907 at Drobak, Norway. The next picture of importance, and probably the second or third picture of UFOs taken, was photographed by Mr. Alfredo Fendricas, a weekly news magazine reporter for the paper in Fatima, in Portugal. And you know, the apparitions began in September, in August, 13th of August, 13th of September, and the 13th of October. In the first apparition, the children saw the sun swooping overhead, and an apparition appeared. And to 3 shepherd children, they reported that to their priest. The priest went with them the next time. The apparition happened. Only the 4 people saw it. They got the word that it was going to happen a third time on the 13th of October. Now, all this is predicted in advance. And by the time of the third anticipated apparition on the 13th of October, there were 12,000 people gathered in the fields there. When the object appeared, it was brilliant, came through saw a spot, and it emerged through the underside of the clouds. It was rotating on a vertical axis, began to swoop over the heads of the crowd like this, making low passes back and forth over the crowd. Alfredo Fendricas got 2 pictures with his camera of the object in the sky. We have one of them here. It shows up as a brilliant ball of light below the clouds. It's a tintype, so it's not the sharpest picture of all. Then the next pictures of consequence were the pictures taken during the Japanese invasion of China and their Manchurian operation. They used aircraft, and objects appeared over the flight line of the Japanese bombers preparing for missions. They appeared following the bomber formations in flight. They appeared in the sky above formations. They even passed through formations, much like the Foo Fighters of modern war history, except they were something else then. And it was during that time, during the Manchurian occupation, that a Chinese or a Japanese general in the occupation forces was walking down the street in Tianjin, China, and his attention was drawn to an object in the sky because the street photographer, one of those with the old bellows camera, had set up, and people started pointing and shouting and pointing to the object in the sky. Rickshaws stopped, crowds stopped, people pointed. The tintype cameraman aimed his camera and took one picture of the object coming down the street. The Japanese general went over and bought it and took it back to Japan. And that's the photograph made in 1942 at Tianjin, China, in the middle, full daylight. The next one of any serious importance was one that was made over Los Angeles on the night of the 24th to 25th of February, 1942. And this was after our war with Japan had started, and we had our cities in blackout at the time. Los Angeles was blacked out every night. San Francisco, San Diego, the whole west coast of the United States. And at early in the morning, like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, disc-shaped objects appeared over the city. And the anti-aircraft batteries turned on the searchlights. The objects passed back and forth through the searchlights, some dozen objects in the sky. They started, anti-aircraft batteries started firing on them, and they fired 1,430 rounds, anti-aircraft rounds of ammunition. Didn't hit a thing that night. They killed a few people. The falling metal from the anti-aircraft shells killed people. Dogs set houses afire, did a lot of damage, but didn't bring down any alien craft. The next one of serious importance, again, was before, well, it was after Kenneth Arnold described flying saucers. Yeah, that was in 1949. But the next photo event of interest happened on the 17th of March in 1950 at Farmington, New Mexico, when on that day, Mr. Walter Rogel, managing editor of the Farmington Times, published news on the front page of his paper, "Huge saucer armada jolts Farmington." Now, what happened on that day, the town's population of about 5,000 people then, looked up and saw spaceships, circular, metallic disc-shaped craft with domes on the top, passing over their city. They were changing position within the formation like a flock of bees or birds. They did not maintain a regular established formation. It was just a large gaggle of objects that flew over, hundreds of them flew over for almost 2 hours, and the same thing happened the following day. One picture escaped collection by the military people that went there and canvassed the houses. They took all the pictures, took cameras, but somebody had in town left town after taking the photographs and took one to Durango, Colorado, where he turned it into the Durango paper, and Durango published this one photograph. Shows about 7 or 8 of the objects in the sky, 5 of them in a loose formation at lower level and 4 or 5 at higher levels beyond it. A bird watcher walking in the woods on the 23rd of April, 1950, was crashing through the underbrush, and he emerged into a clear area not far from Redbud, Illinois, facing the southwest. He came into a clearing from the south side, and as he stepped into the open area, he saw a large object hovering just over the scrub bushes there. Now, this was about 30 or 40 feet in diameter, and it was less than 100 feet high. It was below the tops of the trees. And as he stepped into the clearing there, it started to move, slowly at first, and then faster and faster. He had time to open his reflex camera, where you look in the top, and they're hard to sight in because the scene moves the opposite direction once you move the camera. And he got it open and got one picture, and by the time he could roll the film and get set up again, it had moved so far away, he was afraid he wouldn't get it. He snapped the picture. He got a little dark spot in the sky, but it was not very definitive. It was just a dark smudge leaving. The first picture was a good, sharp, clear picture. And he turned it over to the local newspaper, and it was published on the paper. And a few days later, he was contacted by a newsboy who was throwing papers that time of day down the road in a rural area. And the newsboy said that he saw the object coming from the direction of the woods, heading down the highway at about 4 times, 5 times the speed of an airplane. And he looked up at it and saw it, and he, down the road a little ways, he came on a man and his wife working on the roof repairing it, and he said, "Did you see the thing that just went over?" And they said yes, they had watched it also. So there were other observers that corroborated Dean Morgan's story, and they came out in news reports the following day. So that was an interesting sighting because it represented a type seen rather close up and photographed within 100, 150 feet, 200 feet of the camera. The next one that got any real attention occurred on the 11th of May of 1952 at McMinnville, Oregon, at about 7:30 in the early evening of 11 May 1952. Farmer Paul Trent was in the kitchen of his home when he heard his wife, who called to him from the backyard to come out and see the strange object that was approaching. And he immediately ran for his folding camera and dashed outside to meet her. There against the low overcast sky, he saw a circular dome disc with a tower on top of the dome, a raised cupola. It was moving fairly slow. He had plenty of time to frame it. He snapped the first picture, and then he had to move to his right to snap the second picture. There was no flame or efflux of any kind visible, no sound. It was completely silent. His wife didn't hear any sounds either. The pictures he took on the 11th of May, and he didn't report them until the 12th of June, when he had his pictures developed and back, and he showed them to a friend, Frank Workman, who suggested they take him to the newspaper, and they took him to the Richmond, California Independent, where they looked at them, tested them, and published them for the first time. So now that it's 2 months after the pictures were taken before the information got out. But they have become a classic in the lore of ufology, I guess if you want to call it now. And they've been verified by a number of researchers.